Well, Phil, that was Kimberly Braun. It's always very interesting to talk to somebody who makes a commitment where they actually go into a monastery. And in the Western world, I don't think there's a more cloistered situation than the Carmelites have, especially the
Hmm.
women. And, to leave after 10 and a half years takes a lot of strength. But it sounds like her decision to go in and her decision to leave was very simple and didn't need a lot of reflection. There was no second thoughts about it, which I think that's very unusual.
Probably so. She didn't give the impression that she agonized over the decision to leave, and it sounds like the decision to go in the first place was quite natural for her. I suppose that's rare, but I don't know enough.
Right. It's interesting. A couple of things that came out was well, first of all, I thought she was very sincere. Obviously, somebody that has had significant internal experiences since they're young. Very strong in herself. And I think that takes a lot of inner strength to go through what she went through. And you pointed out she didn't go in at 17 or 18, which is what I originally thought. She went in at 24 when she's had life
Yeah.
experiences. She did dating. She was looking. She said if she had met somebody spiritual, it would have been very different for her. So,
Yeah.
she went in and came out. Uh, Two
You
things. One,
know,
yeah, go ahead.
yeah, just want to reflect on that a moment. I don't know enough about Catholic monastic orders, but the impression I have is they're very rigorous in who they accept and who they
Right.
don't. And I know that at least some of the Swami orders that in the Hindu tradition that I'm familiar with, they're also very rigorous, and they don't want people coming in, on a whim. They put them through a lot, and in some cases they won't take anybody if they're too at a very young age. They want them to have some life experience and to know what they're giving up and be comfortable with it.
Right. I absolutely, and I know, like with the Catholic Trappist monks, and as I mentioned, I'd spent some time at St. Joseph's Monastery, St. Joseph's Abbey in Spencer, Massachusetts. Not living as a monastic, but just visiting there. We used to teach courses in
Hmm.
TM there, and I think it's even it's like a 10 or 12 year program before you can take final vows, and they really screen people. And when I was there, I met two Catholic priests. One of them. Was teaching at a university, and the other was also a teacher at, I think, in a high school. And they both decided they wanted to see if monasticism was for them, and they had both been in there for a year. One guy decided it wasn't, and the other guy wanted to continue to pursue it. But even amongst priests, you can't just go in and say, "Hey, I'll join." I think for the men, there's more flexibility. The Catholic Church is notoriously sexist, and and in the monastic orders, the women have much less flexibility in terms of what they can do. Like she mentioned, there were a number of things she brought up to them that she thought might be a good idea, and they were generally shot down. We don't do things that way. This is the way it is. And I guess if you're all in and you love it, it's great. If you're not, it ain't so great. And I think also, just like many other spiritual groups, once you're in, if you try to leave, a lot of the people, and very sincerely will try to convince you you're doing something awful.
Yeah, I'm sure that's true. They want to make sure people who enter are doing it for the right reasons, and they probably want to make sure the people who leave are doing it for the right reasons, and not just, they miss their family, or they just it's going through a rough patch, or the life is difficult. So
Right.
and they probably want people. Uh, they don't want anybody to stay if they're faking it, or
Right.
it's not right for them. I can't speak for all the groups, but I've spoken to a number of people who have left uh, Hindu monastic orders, and it's not that in those cases they're not trying to keep them in just to sort of keep the numbers up, or something, but they just want to make sure they're making the right choice, and so they counsel them,
Right.
and I'm sure in some cases they will exert some kind of or try to exert some influence to keep them there.
Yeah, no, listen,
Uh,
I can relate. I mean, I was on meditation courses for months at a time. And I on one particular course, after a couple of months or a month or so, I thought, I've had enough of this. I think I meditated out. I don't and even leaving that course, there was I was really encouraged not to, and probably it's not a good idea, and this and that. And I'm sure the people that say that are very sincere, but it's a slippery slope that can also be somewhat dangerous. And in some of these monasteries, one could argue that they become very cultish. Not always,
yeah,
but that possibility is there. And so if you speak to very mature, sort of highly regarded monks like Thomas Keating, those guys and gals at that level tend to be the most flexible and most ecumenical, and looking at different traditions and different even lifestyles within the monastery, I think.
yeah. Um, Look, it's not for everybody. The history of people entering um, is, I don't know what the numbers are of how many people stay, but I'll bet there are an awful lot of people who stay because they come to a point when they realize that they're no longer cut out for it or it doesn't fit anymore, but they don't know what else to do.
Right,
That's all they've known, or they feel guilty, like they're betraying God. So,
right,
I
right.
mean, I've heard from people that there are a lot of monastics who really are a bad fit, but they just stick it out. Um, uh, there's no reason why people shouldn't go through changes in their lives, and what might a commitment that might be right for a certain stage of life, might no longer be at a later stage, and vice versa. There's a lot of people who, traditionally in the Hindu culture, after you've lived the life of a householder, the final stage of life, you essentially become a monk or a nun.
Hmm, hmm.
You do that at the as part of your spiritual evolution.
Yeah, no, I
But
agree. I mean, imagine you're a monk for 25 years, and then you say, well, even her, 10 and a half years, I'm going to go. It's shocking. I mean, where do you go? What do you do?
right, right.
How do you adjust to that? So I'm sure there are people that stay because in any walk of life, because it's not the right fit, but it's more comfortable than anything else. And,
Yeah.
and
I mean,
yeah,
it's hard enough for people to change occupations, from one worldly career to another, to go from a monastery where you may not have many skills.
hmm,
Maybe you worked in the kitchen or the
right,
gardening or something, but
right,
and I'm sure it's totally intimidating
right, right.
and scary. But she obviously has negotiated the whole transition very well, and because she's cut out to be a spiritual teacher, she's able to draw on her expertise, that she acquired as a nun.
Hmm.
You know,
Yeah,
she,
I
she
know. I mean, in the 70s, 80s, 90s, to this day, there was a period of time when a lot of men, especially and nuns, priests and nuns left the Catholic Church for a variety of reasons. And you hear many stories about the difficulties in making adjustments for them. But people do survive. They do get through it. They do make those transitions. I think it's also what was fascinating to me was the lifestyle they lived in the monastery and that rhythm she said I don't know when they went to bed, but they got up at midnight, did chanting or
yeah,
prayers for an hour, then they
wow,
went to sleep till 5:30, then they got up again and prayed. And if you caught it, she said, if you're there a certain period of time and you're sort of, I guess, fully vested, like you've done your 4.5 years, you've taken final vows, then you get an hour of free time a
yes,
day
I
where I
heard.
think you can
Hey,
talk. And
hey,
it's like to us, this is like, God, how could anybody do that? It's like a punishment. But I guess, and we've been on enough meditation courses ourselves. Once you get into a routine of being very inward, then I'm sure for a lot of those people, it's extremely comfortable. and they love that. And it sounds like that was her experience for quite a while until she
Yeah.
got that impulse to move on. And she didn't mention it so much in our interview, but I read about her a bit. And you see, she was asked to go to Texas to a smaller monastery from North Dakota, and uh, and I got to think it's a lot warmer in Texas. And so
Yeah.
she was down there, and then they had the thought, or she had the thought, to build a monastery. So for a few years, she was very involved in that project, and I'll bet that brought her more outward and more thinking about, other ways to live rather than in the monastery.
Yeah. And a lot of a lot of monks and nuns are they may be living in a group, sort of disciplined communal setting, but they are very busy people.
Hmm.
Some of them are doing service work out in the world, alleviating poverty, or running a school or whatever, or they're just busy in the monastery, making wine or growing vegetables or washing dishes or whatever it is they do. So some of them are very work oriented. I know that in the Hindu
Hmm.
monastic tradition, a lot of them are very there's a karma yoga component where they're working.
Right, in all the
And
Trappist monasteries, there's some product, whether it's jam or
right.
coffins. Or, yeah, I mean, I know two that do that. And they're producing something that they sell that helps sustain the facility.
Actually, I just heard just yesterday on
Uh-huh.
a radio show about a monastic order in the U.S. that was making a printer ink
Oh,
for
really?
ink cartridge. Yeah, it didn't work out, but they did it for a while.
I don't know if they high tech it. That's funny. And I also want to mention that I think it's great what she's doing now. She's basically taking the tools that she got in a monastery and sharing them with people in the world, which is the trait that a lot of uh, uh, gurus and teachers from the East brought to the West. They not only brought a philosophy, but they also brought tools for people to use in day-to-day living. And
Hmm.
certainly you get into this stuff in great detail in your book, American Veda. But yeah, this is also, I think, to a larger degree, it came from the East, but there were these traditions right within our own culture that had tools as well. But I think for a long time they were never shared. But now there's a more openness to do that. And she's doing it as a secular person now, not as part of the church or whatever. But I think it's a great service she's providing.
Yeah. And one of the things I discovered in researching American Veda is a lot of people uh, legitimately were drawn to the sannyasi life, the
Hmm.
reclusive life, when they first got on the spiritual path and they wanted to be like their guru, and the assumption was that that's the faster route
Hmm.
to enlightenment than being a householder, and that you could devote yourself completely to your spiritual life, and that was very appealing. But then, a whole lot of them ended up, leaving
Right.
because they got into their 30s or whatever, and they realized they were really cut out to be householders.
Right.
Very few people are, cut
Right,
out.
right. In Catholic Church, about when it came to priests or nuns, there was a saying: "Many are called, but few are chosen," which meant
That's right.
a lot of people
Yeah.
felt the tendency. A recent guest of ours, Paul Mueller Ortega,
Hmm.
gets into from Indian philosophy, Hindu philosophy, that the if you look at it closely, that there's just as much writing and legitimacy to people of the world, householders,
Oh
pursuing
yeah.
higher states of consciousness as there is to monastics, and that sometimes is both in the East and West has been a misunderstanding.
Yeah, and I actually have met a couple of swamis who said the householder life is advantageous,
Right,
because but I guess it's just all a question of what is suitable for the individual,
right.
So
There you go. Well, Kimberly,
there you go.
outstanding.
I'm doing the biography of Yogananda, and people may not realize it, but his guru and his guru's guru were
Oh,
householders.
is that right? I didn't know that.
Yes,
Really?
and yeah, and well, his guru had been a householder and then took vows after his wife
Right.
died and his kid grew up. But yeah, they were. Lahiri Mahasya was a householder and stayed one. You know, after his own illumination, and he started being a teacher. And so was Sri Yukteswar.
How is that book coming along? Are you making all the deadlines that your publisher is setting?
Um, I will take the fifth on that.
Refuse to answer. Yeah, special. Nobody can get. But we wish you well in that book, and for those listeners that aren't familiar with what Phil's up to, in addition to this show, he's writing a biography of Paramahansa Yogananda that we're all looking forward to, and it is
Yeah, well,
2017 and soon.
some people may be listening to this after it's published in 2018.
There you go.
Okay.
Great. Till next time. And please email us. Go to our website, spiritmatterstalk.com. Get the latest information, listen to past interviews, and send us any requests or ideas that you have. Till next time, Phil.
Okay. Bye.